Well, hello everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. Today, my special guest is veteran comic book writer Fred Van Lente. Fred, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure having you, my friend.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, Fred, I think most people know who you are, but just in case there's a few people
Good.
that might not know who Fred is, can you kind of give us a little bit of a background of how you fell in love with comic books, when that started in your life, and did you always
Okay.
have kind of storytelling desire within you?
Yeah. My dad, before I was born, somebody gave him for his birthday. He was kind of into comics, but they gave him for his birthday one year this book Jules Pfeiffer did called The Great Comic Book Heroes, or The
Hmm.
Great American Comic Book Heroes, maybe even. And I got this book into my hands when I was 4. And it was this New Yorker essay that Jules Pfeiffer had written. Pfeiffer had started out as the assistant to Will Eisner when Eisner was wrapping up The Spirit after the war. And so Pfeiffer wrote this very funny essay about what it was like to work in comics in the early days. And this book came out in 1966, which is when the Adam West Batman show premiered and the Galactus trilogy was published, right? So 66, for whatever reason, was this huge convergence of comics, probably part of the nostalgia, right, of adults who had been kids in the 40s were bought this Pfeiffer book, which didn't just have this essay. It also had all these golden age comic stories like Batman, Superman, Hawkman, Spirit, Captain America, Human Torch, Submariner, all these characters. And I love this book. And I made my mother read this book to me constantly. And the way she tells it, one day she was just like, enough. I'm so sick of reading this stupid book to you over and over again. My brain is melting. You know, these golden age comic stories are not exactly the most well written literature in the history of humanity. Uh, so I ended up just staring at the book and figuring out what those little squiggles in the boxes and balloons meant, and so I could read very early on, thanks to comics, thanks specifically to these superhero stories. And so that kind of led me to a long career of wanting to tell stories. I wanted to be a novelist when I was a kid or a screenwriter. I actually went to Syracuse University to study film, but I didn't really like it very much, much to my surprise. What I did like was the comic book club at Syracuse, where I met a bunch of people and wrote for them. They were studying to be comics illustrators and illustrators in general. And a couple of them, uh, I ended up be going pro with, most notably Ryan Dunlavey, who I've done Action Philosophers with and Comic History Comics. And right now we do work for the city of New York. Um, and yeah, so it ended up being comics sort of led me to words, led me to writing, and then writing led me back to comics again.
Did you, like most of us growing up, when you got your first comic book and fell in love with comics, were you sitting on the ground writing your own stories and creating your own characters?
I was, yes. I My dad had like the old timey the printer paper with the holes in it right on the side so you could feed
Yep.
it in. I just drew the adventures of Eagle Man in crayon all over the that computer paper, that spare computer paper he had. And by the time I was 12, I realized probably I'm a better writer than an artist.
Yeah, yeah.
Focused on one instead of the other.
There you go. And then as you got a little bit older, what was your first break into comic book? What was that first title that you were able to kind of get your hands on and start your career?
Well, like a lot of people, I had like a 10-year overnight success, right? So Steve Ellis, a good buddy of mine, who you can sort of see in the background there, that's that print to over my left shoulder, is The Silencers, which is this book we did for Moonstone, a small publisher out of Illinois. I want to say 2003 is when it came out. So he was somebody I met at Syracuse. He actually got his first Marvel work while he's still an undergraduate. That's how good he was. He was doing Iron Man backups, did Spider Woman miniseries. And so we did this comic, and nobody read it, but it did get a very good Wizard review. So it got me in front of Marvel. And so for Marvel, they had me do in the process, and I left out a part where Steve had also worked for Malibu Comics, if you remember Malibu. Um, they hired me to do some stuff, but they ended up folding before they had been bought by Marvel. Many of you know the story. Marvel kind of put them out of business, but not before. My first published comic, which was an issue of Prime. Those of you who remember Prime, he was a kind of like a captain. He was a Shazam knockoff. Essentially, he was a kid who could like have gloop form around him and become an adult superhero. It was a strange book. Uh, and so, but anyway, the silencer. So the process I'm talking about, I'm describing what something that happened basically from 1996 to 2005. 2005, my first Marvel comic came out, and it was a book in a book called Amazing Fantasy, which you may have heard of.
Yeah.
They're premiering new characters for some reason, but it was sort of a new character. It was they decided to make the Scorpion, the Spider-Man villain, a female Shield agent. So that was my first. Even going in, I knew this was a suicide mission, and the fans would go nuts, which they did. But enough people thought the story itself was quality that I kind of stuck around, and they still have not been able to get rid of me, and it's almost 20 years later. So take that.
Yeah. Now, when you were reading that first title that your father put in front of you and your mother was reading to you, was there a certain superhero that you liked the most? And then later on, were you ever able to write your own stories for that superhero, or is that something that you would still like to accomplish?
That's a great question. I don't really know. I vaguely remember liking Submariner the most because he was like the angriest. And would just come to the Philosophers world to mess people up.
Yeah.
Just for the heck of it. Like he was just very antisocial. Like he was not a superhero. He was super powered, but not a hero.
Yeah.
And I did actually get to write Submariner several times, most notably in a book called The Incredible Hercules, I did with Greg Pak. And that the claim to fame of that book, which was the third volume of Hercules, it was on the first ever New York Times bestseller graphic novels list.
Congrats. That's amazing.
Whenever they did it. And they only kept it around for a few years because Raina Telgemeier was at the top of every list. It just turned into the Raina Telgemeier list, and they stopped doing it. I don't think they ever brought it back. But anyway, I got on it a bunch of times. So
yeah,
I can put New York Times best-selling author on all my stuff now. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
But I never, for whatever reason, I have a couple theories, but for whatever reason, I did one DC story. I did a story with the great Nick Dragata for their 2009 Christmas special. And in fact, I'm not going to pick up my computer and turn around, but the splash, Nick gave me the splash for that. And it's hanging over my head. Martian Manhunter, who is not in the Jules Pfeiffer book. So that's the one DC story I ever did. And then Marvel signed me an exclusive. And I've had talks with, so my point being that 90% of, come to think of it, because Pfeiffer worked on the Spirit is in there. And I did get to do the Spirit versus Green Hornet for Dynamite. So that was fun too.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I've never, the DC heroes I like are all either created by Jack Kirby or created by Jack Kirby. Actually, I think the Martian Manhunter.
Yeah.
So it'd be fun to do like a young Scott Free book, like a Mr. Miracle book. I love the Demon. It would be great to do an Etrigan book, but none of those were in the. Those were all the DC heroes were the Alan Scott Green Lantern, the Egyptian Prince Hawkman. Who else? Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, obviously. Is that it? Oh, the Jay Garrick Flash. So the big 5-6 DC heroes were in that book, and then it was 3 timely heroes: Captain America, Submariner, Human Torch, and the Spirit.
Yeah. So
those I've written all of the. I've written all. Technically, I suppose I've never written the Jim Corrigan android. Wait, no, Jim Corrigan's the Spirit. Where's the Spectre? The Spectre was also
the Spectre. Yes, yeah.
I forget what the android Human Torch's real name is, but I've never gotten a chance to write him. But I have been able to write the Spirit, Captain America, and Submariner, so I'm happy.
You did a little with ASM too, right? Spider-Man.
Yep. That was Spider-Man. Post that, Spider-Man was my guy.
Yeah.
Because I had the Pocket Books reprints. I don't know if you're old enough to remember those.
Oh yeah.
Those were like the late 70s. My parents got me those. So they did pocket book reprints of basically almost Ditko's entire Spider-Man run. There were two Doctor Strange books. There was one Fantastic Four book and two or three Hulk ones, and
Oh,
they were like that big,
oh, cool.
and
I
I
have
love
to
them.
go on eBay and take a look at those after
Yeah, I'm sure they I literally read them until they fell apart. So yeah, so getting to do Amazing Spider-Man was super fun. That was a weird job because there was like that was the Webheads era. So I was the last guy to be hired for a 7-man writing team, and
Yeah.
then we all got fired. And they just gave the book to Dan.
Oh, yeah. And what year was that, Fred?
That's a good question. I want to say it was, well, you know what? It was when this Martian Manhunter story came out because it was right after I became exclusive. They put me on Spider-Man, so it must have been 2009.
Oh, okay. Very good. Yeah. Well, then we come to 2012, and you jump right into Archer and Armstrong,
Right.
which it did pretty good. I mean, it won some awards. I mean, to this day, it's probably some of the best stories that came out of Valiant at that time. Obviously, you were working side by side with Robert Venditti, who was doing
Sure.
Exo-Man War.
Yep.
But man, you were
Gosh
part of
Dysart.
it. I'm sorry.
Gosh Dysart doing
Yeah,
Harbinger.
exactly. You were part of a team, I think, won Publisher of the Year 2, 3 times within a 4 or 5 year period. And that's when, I mean, I'm 50 years old, so I certainly in the 90s Image and when Valiant with Jim Shooter and the entire team, I touched it a little bit. But then in 2012, it exploded. And that's when I really fell in love with the Valiant universe. And then obviously you and all these other amazing writers that were putting out these stories, Publisher of the Year, I think it was 3 times within a 5 year period, if I remember, or was it two? It might have
Okay.
been, but it was incredible. It was incredible. I mean, Valiant Universe had such an impact on a lot of us. And you'll probably notice today there's like a few of us that have been hanging on, hoping that something happens with this, yeah, just for dear life. And I was really excited to hear about the resurgence taking place this year. And for you to come back, I mean, did you always kind of hope that you would get another opportunity with this title, or were you kind of surprised that you were asked? Or how did that work out?
Surprised. I mean, uh, Valiant's gone through a couple regimes
Yeah.
since then, since the 2012 bunch. One of which, not this one of which told me they would never ever have people who wrote previous titles come back to write them again, which I thought was a
Do you know
strange
why
decision.
that would be such a
I have no idea.
yeah,
Uh,
okay.
it's strikes me as the sort of thing you tell people to make them go away, but
Oh,
it's not like I was necessarily advocating writing Archer and Armstrong at the time. It just seems sort of arbitrarily like
mhm.
cruel is the wrong word, but it's just
Yeah.
seemed nonsensical. Um, but sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, that were you surprised about having another opportunity of Archer and Armstrong? Were you actually looking to like you had stories that you still wanted to tell that you never were able to, and that now you're able to kind of jump back in and do that?
So last New York Comic Con, Lisa Hawkins, who's terrific, who's the current editor in chief, she came to me and said, "Would you like to do something with us?" And I said, "Absolutely," because I do genuinely love the characters.
Yeah.
Um, and what was awesome was we were talking about doing an Immortal Brothers, what was called at the time an Immortal Brothers story. Now it's Eternal Warriors, which I think is actually a much better title. That was a story I did want to do,
Yeah.
which was a western.
The brothers, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with Claude and Armstrong, Aram,
Hmm.
and Ivar, the Time Walker. So for those of you listening who don't know, there's these three immortal brothers, and they have various adventures. They're known better as Time Walker, the Eternal Warrior, and Armstrong. And then a curveball was at one point they retconned it, so there was a character from a Unity villain called Warmonger, not War Mother, which is a totally unrelated title. I also did. They had War Mo on the brain over there at Valiant at one point. But Warmonger became like their long lost sister, so that was sort of a fun dynamic to add her to the mix, and the four of them go off and have this crazy Western adventure. And I wanted to do this anyway, and then I looked up. Like I'm a big fan of the movie Tombstone and the
Yeah.
whole kind of Wyatt Earp OK Corral mythology. And as it turns out, so what happened, this is real history. So a lot of people have heard of the shootout at the OK Corral, and it's largely the dispute between the Earps, this family, the Earps. There were four brothers, three of whom were involved in law enforcement, and a couple other families who were supporting local outlaws called the Cowboys. And so it was a shootout, and so some of the Cowboys actually went off and then killed. They killed one of Wyatt Earp's brothers and blew the arm off another one. And so Wyatt Earp, defying the county government, which was also pseudo-allied with these Cowboys, he took a posse and went off to go basically vigilante style track them down. And this posse, I did not realize until I started researching this comic, was called the Immortals.
Oh.
So the subtitle of the book, The Last Ride of the Immortals, is sort of neat because one of the fun things of the story is you find out how the immortal siblings being around is why the Earps posse was called the Immortal. So that was
cool.
Yeah, it's sort of like definitely, filed under the department of you can't make these things up.
Yeah.
But what was even more awesome is my favorite title, OG Valiant title, was always Shadow Man.
Yeah, Shadow Man.
But they would never let me write Shadow Man. That for some reason they were like, Fred's the funny guy. Don't let the funny guy near the horror character, which I since that was a book that I think kind of struggled a little bit. But Lisa, bless her heart, gave me this great Master Dark comic to do. So the same month that Immortal Brothers comes out, this book called The Darks is coming out. That's about Master Dark and his sister, where we find out what they've been up to since they were banished into the Ring of Solomon, a previous Valiant event. So that's cool. And then as a consequence of that, out of nowhere, Lisa was like, "You want to do Archer Armstrong?" I was like, "What?" These other things.
So you actually have 3 titles with Valiant coming up then?
I do, yeah. 2 in July, and Archer and Armstrong is August, I think.
Is it August? Okay, yeah.
That's the last time. That's the last thing I heard.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of exciting. I knew of the one for sure, the Archer and Armstrong, but I was not aware of the other 2. So that's really exciting to get
the titles. Yeah, the Darks and Eternal Warriors comes out first.
Yeah. So you'll be able to tell that cowboy story finally that you've been sitting on.
Yes. Yep. Art's looking good.
Yeah.
Really nice.
Will that be an ongoing, do you know, Fred, or is that going to be like a 6-part series, or we're not sure yet?
No, it's they originally supposed to be one shots, but they've been split up into 2 issues. So everything I'm talking about is basically about 50 pages total, 2 issues each.
That is so cool. Except for Archer and Armstrong, that will be an ongoing again?
No.
Oh, that'll still be a...
You know more than I do.
What's that?
Unless you know more than I do.
Oh, no, I don't know. I'm just asking as a fan. Like, are we going to get...
Yeah, no, it'd be fun. It'd be fun. That one took me slightly longer to figure out what I want to do with that, but then I came across a pretty good subject matter involving the Masons and the way Washington DC is built in these various Masonic mystical patterns, and it involves the 1%, which are the demon worshipping Wall Streeters that often are the nemesis of Archer and Armstrong. It's a little different dynamic this time around. In their previous title, Armstrong lost his immortality and Archer gained it.
Mm-hmm.
Or more accurately, Archer got his own immortality and Armstrong lost his. So that's sort of has changed their dynamic a little bit. But I put in Mary Maria in the 1%, and I tried to get in like all of the, all your favorites, so definitely have it be like, a satisfying
I love it,
sequel to my original series.
So are you online looking at like conspiracy theories and then getting inspiration for some of that stuff to infuse into these stories? Like,
yeah,
I mean, with a lot of these stories because they're pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a big history buff, obviously. I have to admit, when I was doing the series from like 2012 to 2014, it was a lot easier to make fun of conspiracy theories until like 2016 when it stopped being funny. You meet too many people who really buy into that stuff.
Yeah.
It kind of came around subsequently, and I was able to get in Nazi anti-gravity and fake moon landings. And this is the Archer Armstrong. It's called Assassination, as the title implies. It involves them. They're trying to find all of the bullets that killed the 4 presidents for U.S. presidents for uh, uh, a good reason. Let's just
Yeah.
leave it at that. I don't
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
get too spoilery,
Yeah.
but it involves the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, and faking moon landings, and not. And I did mention the Nazi anti-gravity and John Dillinger's penis. We you know about the John Dillinger's penis story, right?
No, I
And
don't.
supposedly it was extremely large, and it's sitting in a jar of formaldehyde in the Smithsonian.
Oh, wow.
Apparently, Snopes.com says it's not true. Or is that just, or does Snopes.com work for them?
Yeah, it's interesting, huh?
So yeah, so it's just a potpourri of insanity. I like to say that you shouldn't be able to describe an Archer and Armstrong plotline without sounding like you're having a stroke.
That's a pretty good definition of how you define this story. Yeah.
People should be like, what? What is he talking?
Yeah.
But so that was super fun.
Yeah. In general, as a creator and a writer, Fred, where do you draw a lot of your inspiration? And do you have like a little notebook, like I've read some people do, when something pops up, you're really quickly writing it down so you don't forget? Like, what does that process look like as a creator?
So my wife got me this. This is from Cagliari, which is Sardinia. You know, it's the island west of Rome,
Mhm.
the Mediterranean. So this is my current book of special thoughts.
Oh, that's so cool.
This is for a specific book, a new book I'm currently working on. So this is, I've been working on it since November, so it's about halfway through.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I do some of that. I'm not as I know folks who just burn through Moleskines like they were toilet paper. I'm not quite that.
Yeah.
I don't have that many good thoughts to
I
put
don't know about that. Yeah.
in a notebook, but or more less less false modesty style.
Yeah.
Uh, somebody's a working writer, I tend to just use the whole buffalo, and I just put it all down while I'm doing it. So to be, I think, an effective freelancer, you've got to impose sort of self-discipline on your workday and stuff. Otherwise, you're just playing video games all day.
Yeah. Good
And
point.
I constrain my video game playing to the weekends now.
Yeah. Do you? Very
I
good.
do. I do. It's important.
Very. And then
But yeah.
do you utilize, so I know that you have some courses where you teach people how to write.
Yep.
What is that direction as far as in capturing those kind of ideas for creators? Do you walk through how you do that with your notebooks, or is there another process that you take with your students on how they could capture stories that maybe they draw up at odd times? Like we always think of weird things that we're like, oh, that'd be a good idea at the wrong time, and at least I do.
Well, Tom, you do know I charge for these classes, right? So
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, sorry.
I'm going to give it
I don't
away
want
for
a free.
free.
I don't want a free course. I'm sorry, bro. I'm just.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is
We're
yes.
trying to
yes,
get a free course out of you on this podcast. Right?
Yeah, that's right. I do know this is being recorded. You can't
Yeah.
you can't fool me. I heard the computer lady say it when you hit record.
You did.
The short answer to the question is yes, I absolutely do that. Yeah, that's part of the process. I mean, just I think for anyone to I mean, I guess there's two pieces of free advice. One, like what you say is true. People do obviously walk around and have ideas, and some people think we need to hear about their ideas all the time just because they had an idea. It's great. Those people we call executives. They work a lot in the entertainment industry. They make way more money than I do in Hollywood. Contribute about this much to the great. No, I'm kidding. But actually, I'm not. So the difference between a professional amateur is an amateur thinks everything he does is good, right? And so what separates the pros from everybody else is putting in the time, and this really is, I think, the best piece of advice, free advice I can give to, although I do charge for it as well. On this podcast, I will videocast, I will give this piece of free advice, which is that when you are starting out, and actually scrap that, always and forever, give yourself the freedom to suck.
Okay. Yeah.
Give yourself the freedom to be bad. Don't turn off that critical faculty that's constantly judging you. That's the sort of thing I needed to be told in my teens and my 20s, but I wouldn't have listened because I didn't listen to anybody in my teens and my 20s, including future me. But the creating a piece of fiction, piece of writing, really, whether nonfiction, I would count this also, is a strange thing, because it's not until you finish the piece really that you know what it is.
Mm.
And paradoxically, you can't really fix it and make it what it is until you know what it is.
Mm.
So in other words, your rough draft is always going to be not up to snuff, you know. Or Hemingway famously said that all first drafts are shit. He also said that, you know, when we're talking about writing, we're talking about rewriting. So you need to have that patience with yourself and forgive yourself and be able to make the crappy draft. And then once you get to the end, you're like, aha, okay, that's what I was trying to do. And then you go back from the beginning and then you make it what it needs to be.
Amazing.
So part of that is very much not doing what I did when I was a young person, which is constantly starting projects and abandoning them, either because I was like, oh, this sucks, I suck, it all sucks, or because you came up with some other idea came into your head that you think is going to make you rich and famous.
Do you have an example of where you started a story and you said, no, that sucks, but then later on you picked it back up and then turn it into something?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, more commonly in the sense of I abandoned a project, then returned, basically dug it out of the idea cemetery and picked at its corpse and used various bits and pieces into something else. That I do all the time.
That's cool.
To the point where I don't know if I can think of a specific example. It's so common.
So really, there's no wasted idea then, right? If you are,
you know, well, it's like it's important, I think, to think of it as a process that, which is a bit of a cliche, but it's true.
Yeah.
A process that happens over time, as opposed to like, you know, I'm making a thing, right? And it becomes this thing fixed in space, and then I'm either put it on the shelf and sell it, or I decide it sucks and I put it in a box under the bed and forget about it. It's more like everything is in a process of becoming, right? Coleridge said a poem is never finished, it's abandoned, right? You don't really finish anything. You just it's the deadline. Your editor's like, I'm going to murder you if you don't give this to me. And you're like, all right, here. And it's done, right? And then somebody draws it and it's over, you know? But does that mean it's finished? In your head, there are parts of it, sort of spare parts lying around that you can pick up and use later. Yeah, I mean, I did a book, so I don't mean to keep dumping on this one regime of Valiant, but they put me through some hard times, so I'm going to. So after being out of Valiant for a few years, they were like, we want to do a hardcore series. And for those of you guys who don't know, hardcore are these characters in Valiant who have chips in their brains that you can sort of swap superpowers in and out of, right? So I came up with what I thought, and what I think my editor thought, was a terrific hardcore story. And so we'd gotten approved, and I think it was even starting to be drawn when all of a sudden the person in charge said, can you put this in space? And I was like, what? Because hardcore, again, is like, they're basically commandos with superpowers, right? It's kind of a military intelligence espionage story. But he's like, well, our best-selling title is Exo Man-O-War, and we want another space title. So I need you to take this script that everybody says is good and not make it about hardcore, and make it about these other characters called the Psylords, who we've been plugging in, who we've been hinting at, are Exo Man-O-War. It was very weird. It was somebody who just spent way too much time on the fan forums and had taken from there that what people really wanted out of life was these Psylord characters. And Psylords in original Valiant were, because in original Valiant, most of you Valiant fans know, there was the modern day heroes, but then in Magnus Robot Fighter times, in 4000 AD, back when Valiant had the rights to Magnus Robot Fighter and Solar and Turok, Son of Stone, and those other characters, which are now currently owned by Quick Pop Quiz. Who owns them? Anyone? DreamWorks, correct. If you said DreamWorks, correct. Yes, they bought a company called Classic Media, which had all the Gold Key characters, all the Harvey, like Richie Rich, right? All the Harvey characters. So like Classic Media kind of hoovered up a lot of those older comic book properties that didn't fall in the public domain. Anyway, the Psi Lords were like hardcore. So I think this is where they got this idea. I finally figured this out after months of like tearing my hair out and being like, why are you making me do this? Uh, so the Psi Lords were super powerful harbingers who were evolved from the hardcore technology. So the Psi Lords were like super gods from the future who lived in the Magnus world along with Rye, the world's most dangerous bread, and Magnus and those guys. And so, but modern day Valiant has the 4001 Rye kind of dealio, but we all wanted it, myself included, in present day. So I was developing another property about a bunch of spies who. Oh no! Okay, now I'm sorry. I screwed up the story. So forget all that for now. We're going to come back to it. Yeah. So I was developing a story based on it. So I'm a big role-playing game guy.
Yeah.
I'm running Dungeons and Dragons on Zoom later tonight, in fact.
Oh, cool.
So my favorite game as a kid was this old TSR game, makers of Dungeons and Dragons, called Top Secret. It was this spy campaign. So I did this spy campaign with my players here in the city, here in New York City. That was this. They all had amnesia, and they all had to figure out why. They had been trapped in this room with this sort of experimental nerve gas, and it blew up in their faces, and they couldn't remember, who they were. And then now they had, and these are spies. Like some were KGB. This was set in the 80s. Some were KGB, some were CIA, some were Mossad, some were PLO, right? But they had to work together.
Yeah.
Because as of now, they were the only people each other knew, right? So they had no choice but to trust each other. So basically, I was working on that and kind of really not getting very well. And then when I was asked to do hardcore, I basically took that premise and just basically grafted into hardcore, where the people who got the implants in their chips, it also wiped their memories. So it's a very similar thing. And then then I had to take it, I basically had to rewrite the entire first issue, obviously, to make it not be hardcore and make it be Psi Lords again. And in the process, it was so similar in that these people also have amnesia. And it was a very frustrating process. And as it turned out, they were wrong. The public did not want Psi Lords as much as Valiant thought they did. That's still I still get a lot of love for that series. So I don't want anyone listening to think I'm dumping on Psi Lords, particularly the fantastic art of Renato Guedes, who's amazing. And if you have not picked up Psi Lords, forget the story, just get it for the art, which it is eye-meltingly gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's opera about these astronauts who have their memories wiped and get superpowers. The reason I'm telling you this, because of your question, is because I just signed a contract today. That spy story I told you about,
yeah,
I cracked it. It's going to be published next year as an independent comic. So
that's so cool.
So I guess that is sort of literally what you were asking me about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So weirdly, some people who are Psi Lords fans are going to read this and go, "This is kind of familiar."
Yeah.
There's a very good reason for that.
Very good reason for that. Yeah. Now, I mean, in your career, if you could look back on your career and everything that you've accomplished, is there like one thing that you could point to that you're most proud of? Or is that too hard to do over the span of your career?
I mean, if you're lucky, you have more than one thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. Yeah. I mean, it's probably hard to pick one, but like, what are the things that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is what I've done, and I think part of the secret why, I've been able to do this 20 years of a day job. There's a number of reasons. One of them is I try to stay very diverse in my portfolio as to what it is I'm making. So I'm very proud of Action Philosophers and Comic History Comics and the nonfiction stuff I do with Ryan, but that's very different than say something like Archer and Armstrong, which I'm very proud of. Just because that's a comedy book. I'm very proud of Incredible Hercules and the Marvel zombie stuff I did at Marvel. Taskmaster is a book of Marvel I get a lot of love for. Which the thing is, man, is that when you do this, is what ends up happening, particularly now in the social media age. You hear what other people respond to, right? Yeah. Like I know what other people think is their favorite thing that I've done. And I probably get more Archer Armstrong praise than anything else, which I think is terrific because I am super proud of that series.
Yeah.
For nonfiction stuff. Marvel, like I said, it's Taskmaster and Marvel Zombies to a certain degree. Psylords gets a fair, and Time Walker both get a fair amount of praise. A book I did for Dark Horse called Weird Detective, which was a creator-owned book, like a Lovecraft pastiche. I get a lot of love for that too. So, but it is, man. When it kind of comes right down to it, particularly when you're hustling and trying to make rent money, you don't really think about the past. You're always focused on the future, and there is a lot of ups and downs financially in this job, but I've sort of come around to the feeling that I'm really lucky because of that, because frankly it forces me to stay lean, mean, and out there hustling and coming up with new things and signing new deals and always looking towards the future. It's exciting. It's honestly, I feel like I'm super grateful and I'm super lucky to do what I do because I'm starting to get gray in my hair, and I'm still signing deals and making books and doing stuff and having great interviews with guys like you, and I'm still active. A lot of people I know my age. I'm only 2 years old. I'm 2 years older than you.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of people already starting to wind down. I know people who are planning on retirement. I mean, retirement for me is going to be the cemetery. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, it's just the way it is. Number one, it's that or cat food under a bridge, So, but it's cool. Like you're involved in the world, as opposed to like trying to set up this. I feel like a lot of like people try to, a lot of sort of capitalism wants you to kind of build up this fortress around yourself that you go and live in when you hit 65 or something.
Yeah.
I saw Walt Simonson, the great cartoonist, writer, artist, known mostly for Thor, at this Christmas party I was at in December, and he lives in upstate New York, and then he's like, well, he and Wheezy are moving to Woodstock, and I'm like, why are you doing that? He goes, because we're old hippies and we're going there to die. I was like, then he's mostly kidding. I think he's still drawing.
We'll see, right? We'll see.
They're moving close to their daughter.
Yeah. Is there a positive to, because you had mentioned, right, the grind, always looking for that next thing. And I could see there's negatives to that, and there's obviously positives to that. Sure. What would be the negative to that for you, and what is the positive of always being in that grind to you?
Well, I mean, the negative is just the stress, and the realization that at a certain point, I am going to hit my 70s, and the kids may not be buying Fred Van Lente comics anymore. They've moved on to other people. But like I said, the positive of it is so far, knock on whatever the heck this IKEA desk is made out of. The positive is that because you keep hustling, you are out constantly finding new opportunities and keeping yourself out there, and I think that I feel bad to a certain extent. I do feel like I feel bad for the younger generation, just because I feel like, I was at Marvel from like 2005 to 2012, and then I came back briefly a few years later. I feel like mine is the last creative generation where we really will affect, and I don't know, people there's probably no reason to give a shit about this, but mine is the last generation to really kind of affect those characters in comics. You know what I mean? Because all of the energy is moved to Marvel Studios and the TV shows and the movies, and that for most people is going to be the baseline version of those characters, and that's just history, and that's just how things go. The comics will then be not unlike Thundercats comics, or Rick and Morty comics, right? There'll be merchandising that is associated with this other thing, but the actual main version of this is the other thing. as opposed to it used to be the other way around with the Marvel and DC superheroes. But that's okay.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
like I said, I just feel super lucky, and I still feel super lucky. Even in the tough times, I feel super lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also think with that constant, always looking for the next thing and that drive, it would almost be kind of like a fire that is maybe fueling some of your stories too. I don't
Yeah.
know if that makes sense or if it makes you more thoughtful. Maybe stories come. I like some people strive of doing things the last minute because of the pressure that they put themselves under in order to accomplish something. Now that stresses me out. I'd like to have like something kind of more planned out. I'm just not built that
Right.
way. But others I know, and they're amazing at what they do, but they wait
Yeah.
till the last minute because they need that fire or that drive to kind of open up their thought process. And I don't know if that makes sense to you at all, but I don't know if that
Yeah.
drive, like you said, does that for you as well as a storyteller.
Yeah, I mean, I do know there are some people like who just probably couldn't do this, who aren't wired
Yeah,
to do this kind of thing. It's just too
sure.
much uncertainty. I also, I probably am not really wired for it, but I've just been doing it since literally my entire adult life. So it's like at this point, it's like second nature. Like I don't know how else to do it. I saw so there's a fun documentary about Albert Brooks on HBO Max right now, or Max, whatever they're calling it, and Brooks is talking about his agents complaining when he brings in these crazy projects, and the agent says to Albert Brooks, he says, "Why do you always take the hard road?" You know, and Albert Brooks says, "You think there's two roads? I see two roads. There's no. What do you mean? I have a choice? You know, one road, whether it's hard or easy. That's all there is."
Easy
Uh,
to see two roads when you're not the person, right? But the
yeah,
person.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and the bottom line is I think some folks who maybe don't do this don't really understand is it the ideas are the easy part.
Yeah.
Like I could never live enough lifetimes to execute all the ideas I have
Mhm.
daily. And that's not even a humble brag. That's a curse. It's not I'm not trying to make a positive comment here. I'm just
Right.
saying, like, I'm going to run out of, I'm going to run out of life before I run out of ideas. That's just the bottom line. So to a certain extent, there's a compulsion to keep doing this that makes any other question of like, well, maybe I should have become
Hmm.
a teacher, or maybe I should have become a lawyer. That just makes it irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, the constantly being able to have an outlet for, frankly, these ideas. And also, like, I'm pre-social media. Like, my career began before Twitter was founded. So I almost have you're almost lucky to have a cachet where people will like give you money, right? Because you have an existence
Hmm.
outside of,
Yeah.
TikTok.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Now, with the ideas and having as many ideas, how do you pick the one idea that you want to utilize for a story when you have a whole bunch? Like, what is your process, or do you lean on others to help you pick out of all of your ideas, and that's how you come to like, I'm gonna execute this one?
Yeah, it's a combination of a bunch of stuff. The novel that is currently half existing in this little bookie, that was my agent coming to me and saying, "Hey, have you tried working in this particular genre, which I'd never worked in before, but I thought I had a pretty good idea for." So there was definitely a case of some outside influence being like, "Hey, this genre is really popular. Do you have anything?" You
Hmm.
know, a lot of times that's what people will ask you. They'll say, what do you have?" But then if it's like, Valiant says, we need an Immortal Brothers story. We need an Archer Armstrong story. That makes life a lot easier, because then you can just kind of like see, okay, you look at the gallery of ideas you've come up with over the last 50 years, and you're like, that one. And sometimes you do have to come up with a new idea, you know, and then you just kind of be quiet and listen and walk around. And I read
Yeah.
a lot that isn't comics.
Hmm.
I I like baseball and bicycling and role playing games. Like, I have other interests, right? So I have other avenues. I think some people, you know, that's a common sort of fallacy, right? Is fans always think the most important qualifications for you to write a particular piece of IP is that you're a fan of it. When I would say, like, like my favorite comic when I was 13 was Alpha Flight. was the John Byrne Alpha Flight, and I got to write Alpha Flight, and it was fucking miserable, man. Like it sucked. Like
Really?
on the other end, but on the other end, for the most part, the Amazing Spider-Man, which I was also a huge fan of, that was my favorite comic when I was 8.
Yeah.
That was largely a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it's a real crapshoot. You know,
Yeah.
the Alpha Flight thing was more just because was just the X-Men office at Marvel, regardless, it seems like, of who runs it, is always just this snake pit of like political infighting. So like we couldn't get half the Alpha Flight members I wanted for our storyline because they were mutants, and therefore the X-Men were like, mine. Like,
Yeah.
all right,
Well,
I could go on.
no, I love it. I mean, Fred, it's so interesting to hear your experiences. Now, on the creator-owned side, with all the crowdfunding that's going on, we're seeing kind of an explosion of amazing titles coming to the forefront that we probably wouldn't get those stories if crowdfunding hasn't become what it is. So there's certainly downsides to it, I'm sure, but I myself am I go to my comic shop every single Wednesday and I pick up my pull list, but I find myself probably spending more of my money on crowdfunding or independent comics as opposed to the big two or the big three if you throw Image in there. Not that I don't like them. I'm a big DC fan and a big Marvel fan. Are you seeing that in your experience too? And is there anybody that's doing something unique in independence that you're looking at going, wow, that's really interesting?
Well, there is, at the risk of sounding self-serving, and that person
Oh,
is me.
yeah, yeah. Let's do it.
So I have a Kickstarter going on right now with a great company called Rekka. I'm dropping it in the chat.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's with a great artist named Ennio Ruffi.
Mhm.
It's basically a cyberpunk Mission Impossible called "The Future Is Blank 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 Blank," and it's a near future thing run by actual hackers. Like I'm working for actual white hat hackers, infosec guys. And the artwork's incredible, as you can see from we've gotten a lot of money, which is
Yeah,
nice.
exactly.
Which is cool. So with the project's definitely happening, but that's running for the next over a week. I
Oh,
guess
that's
it's a
awesome.
week as of today, the day we're filming this.
Well, is it okay if I pull it up on the screen real quick so
Yeah,
everyone can
please
see?
do. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
this is my new book. This will be done probably before about the general area of the Valiant stuff. So yeah, scroll down a little bit. The artwork
yeah, that
for
is
the team is just
incredible.
Benio and Andrea is just fantastic.
Well, I'm gonna have to jump in on this. I'm sorry, Fred. I did not know. This is amazing. Well,
Well, the gang over at Rekka, spell it backwards, it's hacker, yes.
yeah.
Uh, they have been mostly promoting it in the InfoSec community, which is
Okay.
absolutely their prerogative.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to do another interview for this next week, but yeah, please do jump on it. And all anyone
Yeah.
listening here too. It's
This is beautiful. The artwork is incredible. Who's the
yeah.
artist on this?
His name's Ennio Ruffi with Andrea. Let's see here. I do not want to
Wow.
screw up Andrea's name doing the Andrea Meloni. And
Wow.
Taylor Esposito, who's a local guy, Jersey guy, great guy.
Yeah.
Letters.
Well, this is beautifully done.
Yeah, no, it's near future sci-fi espionage, industrial espionage,
Yeah.
like humor, and like for those of you guys who are tech geeks listening to this, not that I'm using that in a pejorative term, uh uh there's like built-in capture the flag, like these guys do a lot of gaming with hacking and stuff, so there's a lot of like built-in puzzles and stuff for you to solve
That is
in,
so cool.
embedded in the book itself. So it's super. They made an. I see you're scrolling past. They did an album. Like this is like it's got all the bells and whistles. There's a
Wow.
soundtrack. There's all the bells and whistles you could possibly imagine for this thing.
I feel like some of your role playing that you enjoy doing is seeping into some of your story then.
I know. Well, I have another Kickstarter coming up for those who like the nonfiction stuff. Tom Fowler
Yeah.
and I are doing a comic book history of role playing games that should be
Oh,
launching here in the next couple of weeks. So
that is so cool. Well, I'll make sure I put the Kickstarter down below. That way
sure.
everybody can jump over to this and support it. And then do you already have your other Kickstarter? Like do you have a landing page in Kickstarter where people could go and get
Not
notified?
yet. A couple
Okay,
weeks.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
They
excellent. Well,
will, and that's fun because that's being run by Clover Press, which is currently being headed by Hank Collins, who was at DC forever and was the editor at Malibu when I did Prime back in 1996.
how
So the
cool
more
is
they
that?
change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Wow, that's amazing, Fred. Well, maybe we could end on this point. How often do you go to Comic-Con still? And do you have a calendar where people could kind of meet you? Are you kind of doing an East Coast thing at least, or do you make your way across the country still?
I go where they ask me. I between you and me and the internet, I'm not a huge fan of Comic Cons.
Yeah.
So I really only go when I'm invited. I'm excited because in June, Ryan and I are doing for the first time Heroes Con, which is one of the few big famous cons I've never been, and that's in North Carolina.
That's a
I
big,
go to New York City Comic Con,
yeah.
NYCC every year. Literally, I've been every year they've had it. And I have no reason not to think I'm not going to be there. I have two projects debuting in New York Comic Con this year, so that'll definitely be there.
Yeah.
The short answer to your question is no, there's no calendar because at the moment I'm at Cradle Con in Long Island in May, Heroes Con in June, and New York Comic Con in October. That's it.
No San Diego, huh?
I don't like San Diego Comic Con, so I avoid it.
I will tell you, I live very close to San Diego, and it's such a pain to get in and out of just because of the where it's at and the downtown, and the cost for a hotel is ridiculous during that time. They double in price, but yeah, it's still pretty cool to go to as a fan. But I can imagine you having to work a booth or being at a booth is probably not.
No, Ryan and I tabled one year, and I was like, never again.
Oh, really?
This is just brutal. It's 5 days.
I have a feeling if they hear this, you won't be invited to San Diego either.
Well, actually, you guys should go because Ryan will be there. Ryan Dunlavey will be there for nonfiction stuff. He is a guest this year, so he will.
That's cool.
For some reason, he's doing like 700 cons this year. He's at C2E2.
Oh, I'll be there too this weekend.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, he'll be there. So tell him I say hi, even though he lives half a mile from me.
And then let's really quickly talk about some of the things that you're doing. Can we talk about your course that you offer online on storytelling? How do people find that? That way, if they want to learn from a pro like you, they can.
So the easiest way to do it is to go and use the link on fredvanlundy.com, partly because they kick some extra money my way if they give me this special URL, and it's on my website. Just go to the homepage of fredvanlundy.com. And it's on Domestika. They're a great company that offer all sorts of art classes to all sorts of different people. And the other great thing is that my course is in like 11 languages. So,
oh, wow.
I don't know how you would be listening to me telling you this if you didn't know English. But if you have friends who only speak Portuguese, good news.
Yeah.
This course is for them as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then as far as, are you still writing for 13thdimension.com?
I am. I just had a new column come out on Sunday that was on the 70th anniversary of the U.S. Senate comics hearings.
Oh, that's cool. So we could go to 13thdimension.com and check it out there. And then as far as social media, it's just your name?
Yes, sir.
Social media for X, Instagram, and Facebook. Those are the three you're on,
and
right?
Blue Sky.
Oh, Blue Sky. That's right. Blue Sky too.
Yeah. Facebook.
Perfect. Anything else we're leaving out, Fred, that you want to?
Probably,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will tell you, I'm very excited to see you back on Archer and Armstrong.
I hope people really dig that. The artist has been send me some of what he's been working on. It looks fantastic. And in a month, the Game Masters, the comic book history of role-playing games, will be kickstarted by Clover Press. That's by me and Tom Fowler, and likely some exciting guest stars as stretch goals. And the Valiant stuff is coming out over the summer, and I guess I should announce the two things for the fall because I think other people want to do that.
Yeah, no problem.
Too early for that.
Beautiful. Fred, it's an honor to have you on. I hope that maybe we could do this again as the title comes out. That would be amazing to have you back.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Beautiful. I really, really appreciate it. Congratulations on all your success. And thank you, because folks like you have been able to feed amazing stories to fans like me. And it's always an honor to meet those people that you look up to.
Well, thank you for reading.
Yeah, absolutely, Fred. I wish you the absolute very best the rest of the week. And at C2E2, I will find Ryan and I will say, hey, Fred says hello. And awesome. But I really appreciate you, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks a lot.
All right, talk soon.